My name is Angela. My question is primarily for Barry. I'm curious, you work in legal academia. We hear a lot about how ideological differences are shaping academia, but we don't really hear about it in the legal field. And that's where free speech and a lot of our foundational freedoms come from. Do you have any thoughts you'd share with us about how ideology is changing law practice starting in schools?
Well, the legal academy, like the rest of the academy, has traditionally been very liberal. And so, you know, if you do have a conservative perspective, you know, I think it's been the case where, you know, a lot of people in the past have felt fairly isolated and even have alleged, you know, retaliation, you know, for their conservative viewpoints. I do think that, you know, the whole controversy over hate speech is well documented by Lou. It is having a salient effect in that I think that people are understanding that they need to be more tolerant, at least in the legal academy, you know, of different ideological viewpoints. And so I have sensed over the last few years, at least, you know, the sense that there has to be tolerance of differing viewpoints, and I'm hoping that, you know, that change is real and it's just not my imagination, and I'm hoping it's filtering down to the students, because I really do think that, you know, we're not going to solve problems by screaming at each other. We really just need to listen to each other and you know, try to persuade each other of the rightness of our viewpoints.
Yeah, so I was so happy to be able to get someone like Nadine Strassen, you know, former president of the ACLU, to take part in this documentary. And one of the real goals that we had was to show that free speech shouldn't be a left or right issue. You know, it should be an everybody issue. It should be, if there's one thing we should all be able to come together on, to be like, hey, this is one thing we can, you know, we should all, you know, be supporting and be protecting. It's this foundational principle. So for us, it was really important to have figures like Nadine, to have journalists like Jesse Singal and all that, people with whom I may disagree with on all sorts of different things, but those disagreements aren't going to create anything good unless we're able to actually talk with one another and argue with one another. So, any?
Thanks. That was a good documentary. I liked it. It's good to talk about the symptoms of all this. And I think it's also important to address, you know, the root of the disease, which goes into the media and the academia, and goes back to the Columbia school in New York and Frankfurt School. So this is like a 30s, and this is a deeply embedded thing. It's one thing like, SJWs, they suck, man. But the other thing is like, what do we do? This is so ingrained and tough to root out, especially when we're like, you know, kids go to school to get brainwashed. Like, what? But you kind of need to sometimes. Anyway, what, do you guys have any ideas how to get out of this? Somebody has the answer, I'm sure.
I get these questions a lot, especially from undergraduate students who are saying, I'm going to graduate school and how do I deal with this, because I don't think like this and I don't know how I'm going to survive 2 to 5, 6 years. So what I tell them is, you know, when you go in, are you an undergrad or a graduate student?
I'm just, yeah.
You're a hell of a guy.
I mean, I think you have to pick your battles, because definitely if you're going to be there for more than a couple of years, it's going to be exhausting if you're fighting with everybody. And, you know, as Barry mentioned, academia is very left-leaning, and it's gone even more. I consider myself to be liberal, but even since I left 2 years ago, it's gone even more left. But in terms of, say, looking for professors to take classes from or supervisors as mentorship, you can get a sense of what someone's like if you go on their webpage and see the things that they publish and see what's on their social media, so that will give you a sense. And I think people have a reputation too as well, if you ask around.
Last night in Portland, we had Brett Weinstein and Heather Hying. Those of you may remember them from the fiasco at Evergreen State College. And one of the things that we talked about is, you know, getting back to this desire to seek out truth and to seek out verifiable truth, or truth that that can be argued for. And I think that's a really important part of this. I didn't study the hard sciences or anything like that. In college, I was an English major, and what I found, and this was like back in the day, like maybe 17 years ago, back in college, I found what I would call B- papers, and what that was is I have a paper due the next day, and I need to write it really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze this story through a Marxist lens. Or I'm going to analyze this story through a Marxist feminist lens, or I'm going to analyze this story through, a postmodern consumerist lens. And what that does, what that ends up doing is the lens becomes the material as opposed to what the actual material is. And I think working even in the humanities and stuff, they're getting back to the idea of like, why do we create art? Why do we communicate? Why do we share? Wow, I didn't know I was going to get so deep and maybe cry right now in front of all of you. But I think trying to get back to truth and also a shared humanity, because we're all in this world together, and it'd be great if we all could see things in a similar light, or at least teach people how to see things for what they are. I guess that's what I was.
Hi, my name is Catherine. Hi, Professor McDonald.
Hi,
So,
My brilliant student.
yes, thank you.
Great, I'm glad you're a student. That's just not something you just call. Like everyone just calls you professor.
My question is I remember when I think it was the president of Planned Parenthood lost her job because she said trans women can't have abortions. Well, trans women don't have uteruses. They can't actually have an abortion, but it became this point where she lost her job, and this is somebody who I don't agree with in any way, but I was like, wow, I'm seeing this censorship of people, not even just in if you want to talk about even the government censoring what you can and cannot say, but in the private sector of what you can and cannot say. And even, this idea of cancel culture where, people lose their jobs or they lose opportunities because of a tweet they sent 15 years ago. And so I'm wondering, is there a way to provide protections for people in a way where it just feels like it is becoming so extreme, even in the private sector of, well, you said this one thing 10 years ago, or and it's so, where actually there was no harm that came from it, there was no violence that resulted from it, but it was deemed offensive, and then people are losing work, they're losing jobs, they're losing opportunities. I mean, is there a way to,
Is it almost like where you would have discrimination based on race or sex, like sort of a viewpoint discrimination?
Oh yeah, or even I'm thinking of I'm blanking Kevin Hart, when Kevin Hart lost the opportunity to host the Oscars because of a tweet he said 15 years ago that he already apologized for, and it's like, okay, well now, I mean, obviously the Academy of Motion Picture Arts is not the government, but they're saying, well, we're going to say that either you apologize for this again, or you're not going to have this opportunity. And he said, no, I won't, and he lost that opportunity. So I feel like what I'm concerned about is seeing it in the private sphere where people are being penalized and bullied and shut down for a viewpoint or an opinion or something that was said years ago or something they say currently. Are there any efforts being made to combat that? Is that something that can be fought, or no, because it is the private sector?
There.
Well, as you know, state governments could pass laws, to prohibit viewpoint discrimination as well as other types of discrimination. They might have some First Amendment defenses to that, but, I think that, it would be intended to allow greater diversity of ideas, so I don't think there would be much of a First Amendment objection to those kind of laws. So it's, in my view, it's theoretically possible for states to do that. I don't know about Congress, it's more limited, but it's taken on so much power, perhaps federal law could pass muster too. The question is, I don't think it's really a legal question, it's really a political question. Would there ever be political support for that? Because of course, the person that is being discriminated against is typically holding a minority view that is disfavored by the majorities that sort of support the current established way of thinking, and I don't know. What do you think, Debra?
Give me a second.
Well, I definitely think a lot of this comes down to culture, and apparently, we're sort of living in a time where there seems to be less and less forgiveness for past misdeeds. Earlier today, I had lunch with a friend who has a son who's 10 years old, and one of the things on his mind is like, man, is my kid living in a world where he can't fuck up? Like where something that he does, 2 years from now is just going to come and completely, derail his growth and his maturity and all that. And that's a really scary thing to have to think about. But also, I think if you also codify, being unable to remove somebody from a job because of their viewpoint diversity, then what does that mean for traditional things like churches and that sort of thing? Like, do you have to have an organ player in your church even though that organ player is an atheist? Or I think it'll get really muddied. Where I think at this point you might hear about a lot of people, say perhaps conservative or on the right, who might be losing opportunities, but the same thing could happen, from the other side as well. I don't know.
Well, Europe is experimenting with a way to sort of address the problem of things from a person's past, and I believe it also includes controversial things they may have said. They passed a law sort of enshrining a right to be forgotten and requiring internet service providers like Google to delist certain things, and it's very controversial in the United States. People are opposed to it because they do think that it infringes too much on free speech rights. So I think, with free speech, as the person that you interviewed in the video said, is a very complicated mix of different factors, different interests that have to be balanced, and that's just one example of how the United States has differed from a lot of European countries on striking that balance, for example, between privacy and somebody else's free speech rights, privacy and dignity rights versus free speech rights, and perhaps the right to sort of reclaim your life after making a mistake in the past. And so, again, I think these things are more for sort of policy, political discussion than they are really a matter of strict law.
I think regarding cancel culture, it's really only a matter of time before everyone gets canceled, though, because no one is perfect. And I think for myself, I don't know, Barry, have you been canceled?
No, I haven't.
Right after this show.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, Barry. This is the whole setup.
I feel like they probably tried to cancel me a couple of times, and you just keep going. So at some point, everyone is going to have to atone for something, and as long as you don't apologize. If you haven't done anything wrong, there's no reason to apologize.
Debra and Lou, do you resent Barry for his white privilege? Is that pronounced? No,
I resent us for being so tall and handsome.
I don't think that's fair. Well, you resent me for the same reason. No, my question actually is primarily for Debra, but I think, Lou, it might apply to you too, is, Debra, you said that you have to have security at these events and you're being threatened. Obviously, the heckler's veto was something we talked about earlier, but I'm wondering, as a journalist, within the journalistic community, we look to journalism as a bastion of, this is supposed to be truth and protecting what is true and what is factual and reporting things. Do you find that you are being ostracized from that community as well, or is there support in there? And Lou, on a far, far lower degree, as somebody creating content in the media, do you find that you're getting support from other media outlets, or are you ostracized for having views that aren't in the mainstream?
Say yes, I'm not, well, in terms of do I feel like there's some ostracization, definitely, I don't really care because I believe in what I'm saying, and so I've been very, very lucky in that the outlets I've written for and my editors are very supportive of me, and I've never felt like I've had to censor myself. But I think they know that about me too, that if I'm gonna come on board with something, that I'm gonna speak my mind. So I think Part of it might be just the current climate. I do find that I'm a liberal, but for whatever reason, if a liberal publication has published me, they're going out on a limb doing so. I find conservative outlets have been much more open to me, even though they know we don't agree on everything. I'm hoping that will change because definitely as a journalist, your job is to be objective. I'm a columnist, so I have a little bit more room in terms of giving my specific opinion, but I do base everything on the scientific research, as I said. So there's no reason for people to feel they may disagree with me, but I'm happy to engage with them on social media for that reason. But I think for many people, they're rewarded for not engaging. Like nowadays, it's seen as you are complicit, or you are what's the word that they use? Where you're basically, if you engage with someone or you bring them on your show to debate them, you're giving them a platform, you're giving them some legitimacy. So what you're supposed to do is basically shut them down or ignore them or just don't engage. And so I don't think that's going to help at all.
Are there actually, I'm sorry, just a quick follow-up. Are there people within the journalistic industry, do they come after you for your viewpoints as well? Do you find people taking a position actively going after, or are they just like, you're a journalist, we're going to respect each other's professionally and leave it alone, or are they, it's now lines or no, non-existent lines?
How many blue checks
Well,
come after you?
I was just going to say, this is the crazy thing, because to me, as a journalist, especially if you're on social media, you're representing not just yourself, you're representing also, even as a freelancer, you're representing the publications you write for to some degree, I think, even though you're not technically an employee. And I'm just amazed at some of the things, like some people will just be cursing at me, and I'll think, who is this person? And then I see that they write for a really prominent outlet, or they get a lot of airtime on certain shows, and I'm thinking, this is very strange, and yeah, it is what it is.
And I think with my experience has been in comedy. When I was living in LA years back, my dad, he's an immigrant from Argentina, and he left Argentina, I think a few years before there was like a military takeover and stuff where they were, murdering students and stuff, and then deaths and murder on both sides. And I don't know much about the specifics of the conflict, but he said, in your industry, he called this my industry. He said, be careful what you say because you don't want it to affect, where you go. And that's my dad looking out for his son. He loves me. He wants me to do well. But what I found was when I stopped, not necessarily having a filter, but when I started opening up and talking about subjects that are on my mind and things that I care about, things that I think are funny, because I'm a comedian, more people started listening to it. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are looking for authenticity. And if you're authentic, you can do your stuff and you can find an audience for it. And then also, I've had the experience, I've been working with my comedy partner, Greg Berg, since college. We've been together, almost 17 years doing stuff. And at no point did we ever stop creating our own stuff, because we've always been of the mind, nobody is going to give us a shot. Mm-hmm. Nobody is going to do the work for us. Nobody's going to write a show for us or anything like that. We have to make it. Especially nowadays with technology, there's so many ways to get your work out there. That you really have no excuse not to put your work out there. And you know how it is as a podcaster and all the work that you do. Lions of Liberty is a great podcast. You guys should check it out. So kind of like those two things, going together. I don't have time to be thinking about, if there's a conspiracy, kind of holding me back, or someone isn't calling because I tweeted this thing out there. Just have to, concentrate on what I'm doing and trying to do what I like. And look, we got a whole room of people out here. That's pretty cool. In LA on a Wednesday night, that's not bad. I want to thank Debra Soh and McDonald for sharing their time with us. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and follow our page. Make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss a video. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to support us, check out our website, wetheinternet.tv.